All right, so this is part five, I think, of a multi-part series. I've been asked a few times to tell a little bit more about my story of retiring early and the finances behind that, and my work and jobs behind that. Um, and so this is the last leg of the journey. At this point in the journey, and at this point in life, I still don't have a degree. I have about three-quarters of an associate's degree, but I didn't finish, and I'll tell you why I didn't finish in this section as well. So, um, yeah, so I was offered a job outside the factory at the engineering center. So after 7 years of being in the factory, I left the factory and started working in R&D in as like a vehicle analysis, competitor analysis, engineering position, and it was my last job at Volkswagen. And with every job that I had at Volkswagen, it was through totally untraditional means that I got the job. When I got called and interviewed for the job originally, when I came in off the street, I didn't even, I accidentally had my resume on the internet. I mean, I wasn't even looking for a job anymore. When I was approached and asked to go to Germany, I didn't even know that Fred's time in Germany was coming up and that they were looking for a replacement. I didn't apply. I didn't give anyone my resume. When I was getting ready to leave Germany, I was intending to go back to Michigan, and an old boss, Fred, called me and brought me to Chattanooga. And when I was in Chattanooga in the factory, it was the VP of engineering who basically came and offered me a job. And so when I look back on my career, although I worked hard, and although I cared, and although I must have had some sort of talent for some things that I did, um, I have to say that I just see over and over again God's fingerprints on my situation and on my career, because all of the incremental steps that I took really were undeserved. And the doors that were opened for me um, were really sort of unprecedented. When I started on the helpline, I was 19. I literally had guys there saying like, "What the hell could you know? I have underwear older than you." When I was asked to go to Germany, I was 20. No, I was 23. The paperwork that I signed said must have a bachelor's, should have a master's, should speak two languages, and I couldn't do any of those things. I didn't have a degree. And when I started in the factory, I was the only one in the department without a college degree. And when I started in engineering, I was the only one with a college degree. And I'm not saying those things to say, look at me, I don't need a college degree and I made it. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm trying to say is that, I was like Joseph in, Pharaoh's kingdom. Like I didn't deserve what I got. And sometimes when I say that, people immediately try to reassure me, like, oh, but you worked hard. Yeah, I worked hard. There's a lot of people who work hard. There's a lot of people who have probably worked a lot harder than me and not been given opportunities. So just because I worked hard doesn't explain the extreme unlikelihood of the opportunities that I was offered. And I can do nothing less than give the credit to God for that. Anyhow, so I spent my last 2 years at Volkswagen working in R&D, research and development, and I really think that God pulled me out of that factory and put me in that office for um, one reason and one reason only, and that was a particular friendship. Um, there's a guy who'd been with the company a long time, just like me, and we didn't really know each other that well. Um, but this friendship with him has been a blessing beyond blessings. And I think that he was sort of the friend that got to walk with me through this last little section of my career and journey at Volkswagen. He helped me see some things that I hadn't seen. And he was an immense encouragement to me. And one of, I wasn't really expecting to cry on YouTube. One of the Bible verses that was so impactful during that time, and still is Psalm 90:12, which says, "Teach us, O Lord, to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And I pondered at great lengths what counting one's days had anything to do with wisdom. And it struck me that most of us tend to think we're going to keep on living, till we're 80 or 90 or something. Very few of us have any reason to think that tomorrow will be our last day. And if you were given a cancer diagnosis and you were told that it's likely you only have 6 months to live, I'm quite confident that you would live those 6 months quite differently than if you hadn't been given that diagnosis and you thought that you were going to keep on living. And in particular, I thought about that verse as it relates to my children, because I will only be a father of children for a few more years. Because when my children are adults, they are no longer under my authority, and I no longer have a guaranteed sphere of influence over them, and they will be adults. And so I began to count my days with my children as a percentage, which is part of the reason why in our family we celebrate the 9th birthday more than the 10th, because 9th is halfway to 18, which is adulthood. And so this concept of time was really on my mind, and counting my days, and my days are running away on me. And some of you may have seen I have a hat that I had made, says less than 2/3, and that was my way of counting my days to say that I have less than 2/3 of my life left on earth, because I believe that when we die, there's an afterlife and we will continue to go on living. And so at the time when I had that hat made, I was 33. And so I figured, well, I'm not going to make it to 100. So I got 1/3 of my life over with. I have 2/3 left, but maybe less than that. Anyway, so in a short period of time, I had my uncle died, and also my wife's uncle died. And it wasn't particularly traumatic, but it was a loss of life close to us. And then shortly thereafter, my friend I was telling you about at Volkswagen, his cousin died. And his cousin was 35 and had 6 children, and died in a freak ATV accident over the weekend. And this cousin essentially was the best friend of this friend of mine. They had grown up together and they were extremely close. And it rocked my friend's world, and it rocked my world. And it didn't really turn me around. I was already thinking about life and the time that's running and all of that, but it just accelerated me in that direction. And at the time, I was taking a linear algebra class, and I had like a 97% in the class, and we only had like 3 weeks left of class. And I was in the middle of this linear algebra problem, and this friend I'm telling you about was texting me, because he had already told me that his cousin had died, but he was just texting me some kind of details and things he was wrestling with. And he sent me this song, and he said, like, I'm really enjoying this song, like it's really encouraging me right now concerning my cousin. And I wrote him back and I said, like, hey man, I'll have to listen to it later, I'm right in the middle of linear algebra. And I was falling behind in linear algebra, and so my wife was taking the kids out of the house to go do stuff around town to kind of give me the privacy of the house. And I remember, in part because I couldn't focus and I was emotional, all these things, I remember it took me about an hour and 45 minutes to do one linear algebra problem. No, I'm sorry, 45 minutes, not an hour. It took me 45 minutes to do one linear algebra problem, and I got it wrong, like way wrong. Like I couldn't even recognize what I had done wrong. I must have done so much stuff wrong. And then I think I did another problem, and it took me like an hour. That's where the 145 comes from, and I got it wrong. And I decided to drop out. I decided to drop the class. I literally had a 97% of the class, but I decided to drop it. And I told my friend how sorry I was that, like, here I am solving matrices so that I can get a degree that I can put on my resume that says I'm an engineer, even though I've been working in engineering for many, many, many years now. And of course, I still had a lot to learn. I'm not saying that I knew everything and you don't need school or anything like that. But just like, I'm missing out on my kid's life. I'm missing out on my friend's life. And like, life is so short. And yeah. So I was getting closer and closer to what my wife and I had been sensing and feeling for several years, which was that, you know, my wife and I had been working, and I cover this in some of my other videos. My wife and I had been working towards this thing called the FIRE, Financially Independent Retire Early. We had already paid off our house when I was 30, and we were saving up a big nest egg so that we could retire, and we could basically say, okay, God, here's all of our money, here's all of our time. We'll go anywhere you want us to go, just say the word. And it felt like this day was approaching quickly, and more quickly than the math said it should. You know, like we weren't going to have the right amount of money to retire. We needed like close to $800,000 before we were ready to retire. And according to the 4% rule and FIRE and all of that, you can Google it. So, yeah. So, I was on a plane on my way to Michigan for a Volkswagen event, and this is I guess slightly off topic, but I'm about to end. So, and I was reading a book called Walking His Trails, written by Steve Saint, who's the son of Nate Saint, who's the friend of Jim Elliot, who is the leader of the 5 missionaries who were speared to death in Ecuador in maybe the 70s or the 80s. I don't remember the year, sorry. And I got about halfway through this book, and this book was essentially nothing more than every chapter was basically a story, and it was a story of an encounter with God. And sometimes the story was tragic, like when his daughter died. Sometimes the story was euphoric, like when they got a big contract and made a bunch of money. But on that plane, while reading that book, the way I like to phrase it is that God gave me the final measure of peace that I needed to say, I'm ready to leave Volkswagen. I'd known that day was coming, or I had suspected that day was coming for several years, and we were kind of aiming in that direction. And even my boss knew that I planned to retire at 40, but it came early at 35. And I got off that plane, and I had already made my decision. And maybe I'll save sort of the more spiritual stuff for a different video, because this is more about finance and career and all of that. Obviously, it's all intermingled, and I'm not trying to shy away from that, but just to sort of put some bookends on the topic. So in early February, I told my entire chain of command, my manager, my director, and my vice president, that I was leaving and the reason why. And they were extremely supportive, which was really gracious and great. And I officially retired on May 19th. May 19th was my last day at Volkswagen. At the time, I was making $94,000 a year, I think. Medical benefits, 401k, dental, optical, 20 paid vacation days, and like a $10,000 bonus in May, basically. And I've said this in other videos, but maybe just to kind of put it here as well. So basically, when I retired, we had no debt. everything was paid off, the house, the cars, everything. We were able to spend around 22, maybe $2,200 a month in expenses, including independent health insurance through Medishare. And we had about $400,000 saved. So depending on how you do the math and depending on how optimistic you are, that money will last 15 to 20 years at that rate. So that's why I always put an asterisk next to the word retire, because it's not really true retirement in the sense of I have enough money that I never have to work again. And that's part of the reason why my friend, the same friend I've been telling you about, encouraged me to start this YouTube channel to maybe earn some income. But ultimately, it was a step of faith, because the numbers don't really add up exactly how you would expect them to. And ultimately, it wasn't a financial decision that we made. It was a spiritual decision that we made. But since finance is the sort of the key to unlock this sort of lifestyle, whether you're called to it or not is something else. But the way that we handled our money, budgeted our money, stewarded our money, saved our money, spent our money, earned our money, all of these things obviously play a massive role as to our ability to do this with, without immediately falling into debt. Sorry. So, yeah. How do I conclude a thing like this? So if you've watched all of these, you've just heard from me for like an hour about my life, which feels a little bit insane to publish on the internet for anyone and everyone to see. But I guess maybe in conclusion, what I would like to say is that I believe the creator of this world is a God of second chances. And so if you have a story like me where you completely screwed up school, I hope that you don't lose hope. If you are in a position where you earn enough money to meet the needs of your family and save, man, I would encourage you to save. I would encourage you to save radically so that you can put yourself in a position where you retire early. You can Google FIRE and Mr. Money Mustache and all that kind of stuff if you want to get into the nitty gritty. I'm probably not the best person to teach that, but I will tell you, I thought I was happy and I thought I was free. And now that I'm in this phase of life, I feel like what I was in was slavery. And I know that not everyone earns an amount of money that will allow you to save enough that you can retire early. But all I will say is that if you think a little bit outside the box and you're willing to live in a trailer park or drive just one car or not have a cell phone or not have television or not have the internet at your house or not eat out so much, you might be able to live way below your means like we did. We basically, even when I was making $120,000 a year, we basically only spent $35,000 a year. We basically only ever so slightly deviated from my original income. And I can do more videos about how we only spent that much money, but I don't know how interesting that is to everybody. But I would just encourage you, whether you believe in the Bible or not, the wisdom of that sentence, teach us, O Lord, leave that part out if you like, to count our days that we may gain our art of wisdom. Nobody's living past 100. And some people are dying tonight. And I don't get to choose which of those two people I am. You don't get to choose which of those two people you are. And I think that if more people would think about that truth that we're all going to be dying soon, some sooner than later, some more surprisingly than others, some unexpectedly than others, then we would live our lives totally differently. We'd turn off Netflix, we'd turn off YouTube, we wouldn't lose our patience with our kids, we wouldn't squander our money on Chick-fil-A, We wouldn't waste our time bitching at our neighbors about stuff that doesn't matter. I mean, man. And so that would just be my encouragement to you. Count your days. Count your days by less than percentage. You know, whatever age you are, subtract that from 100 and assign a percentage, and you got less than that percent of your life left. I got less than 74% of my life, 64% of my life left. Nobody's making it to 100. Count your days. Everyone will benefit from that. And I hope you found this interesting or encouraging or inspirational or convicting or clarifying or life-giving or something, because I feel a little exhausted now after having made it all. And I hope it was beneficial to somebody. Take care.